And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I built the most obnoxious deck that I've ever built. Obviously, this is not going to be the most obnoxious deck you've ever seen because a lot of people out there are playing hardcore stacks and I counter all your stuff. This is the most obnoxious one I've ever made, and it happened purely by accident. I obviously wasn't trying to do it on purpose because I don't try to make obnoxious decks that are going to essentially frustrate or even infuriate all of your opponents. It is kind of a funny, interesting deck though, so I am going to talk about it here. The genesis for this deck sort of came from the card Stony Brook Banneret. 1 and a blue, Merfolk Wizard 1/1 with Island Walk. Merfolk spells and wizard spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Now, of course, a lot of people likely have this in their commander deck. It's been reprinted in commander sets because, of course, if you're doing Merfolk Tribal, it's pretty great. And if you're doing Wizard Tribal, it's pretty great. And I thought, well, that's a pretty good combination there. Merfolk and Wizard. Of course, this card is a Merfolk and Wizard. And I thought, well, why not make a both Merfolk and Wizard tribal deck? Of course, both tribes are incredibly popular in the format. Why don't we stick them together? And in particular, what I noticed both tribes really like to do is tap down their creatures, right? If you look at an Azami, wants to tap down wizards to draw cards. If you look at Kumena, Tyrant of Oreska, wants to tap down merfolks to draw cards and do other things as well. So I thought, okay, well, if we combine both of them and have a whole bunch of merfolk and wizards in the deck, then we can tap them down with Azami to draw cards, or we can tap them down with Kumena to like put +1/+1 counters on all our creatures, stuff like that. And of course, a lot of people will say, okay, well, isn't Kumena already doing that? Well, Kumena's not a merfolk wizard, and so for that reason, I don't know how many people are actually doing wizard tribal stuff in their Kumena deck. I did put in the 99 of this deck. It is not the commander, though. I wanted a merfolk wizard as the commander, so I chose Adrix and Nev Twincasters as the commander, because it is a merfolk wizard, and I wanted a merfolk wizard in the command zone, and obviously I also wanted the blue-green colors for very specific reasons. So 2 blue and a green merfolk Wizard 2/2 with Ward 2. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. And that actually is a very relevant ability. I don't build monolith commander decks for myself or even on my channel so much anymore. I like to build decks where the commander isn't entirely necessary. It is just an assist in what we're doing, and Adrix and Nev are an assist in what we're doing once we get to certain situations in this deck, which I will get to. We obviously have a deck filled with merfolk wizards, and as it happens, cards like Fallow Sage and Surge Spanner, which are both merfolk and wizards, also want to be tapped, right? So that is fitting the theme of what we're doing. This is a tapping theme, essentially, but also merfolk and wizards. So we're doing 3 different things in this deck, and obviously the green is fantastic for those Seedborn Muse or Mercfiend Liege effects. I think these 2 cards are the only creatures in the deck that aren't merfolk or wizards, but obviously they're doing a whole bunch here because they're going to untap our creatures so that we can continually be using them for those tap down effects. Talrond Sky Summoner is also a merfolk wizard, and one of the cards that works with the token theme with Adrix and Nev, right? Because whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. So of course, we're going to get 2, but also our Talrond, which I imagine anyone playing a Talrond deck, their commander just sits there doing nothing. You're just getting this triggered ability. Now we can tap them down to give us some sort of effect from one of our other cards that want us to be tapping down merfolk and wizard, right? Of course, a Talrond deck already can be a little obnoxious, as a lot of people will point out, and wouldn't you know it, as I was doing the research for this deck, I started to notice that merfolk wizards really like countering stuff, like Curse Catcher, which is a merfolk wizard, and Vodolian Hex Catcher, which is a merfolk wizard. Now we're starting to get into the part of this where it starts getting a little obnoxious. Of course, another card that wants you to be tapping down your wizards, which is very similar, Patron Wizard. Blue, human wizard 2/2. Tap an untapped wizard you control. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. So yeah, you can start to see where this is going. Obviously, we're going to be doing a whole lot of countering in this deck. Patron Wizard obviously wants us to be tapping down our wizards to counter spells. Merfolk Wizard already are in the theme of countering stuff, and probably the best at this is Lull Mage Mentor. 1 blue Merfolk Wizard 2/2. Whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, you may create a 1/1 blue Merfolk creature token. And of course, that fits the Merfolk Wizard theme, the countering theme, all of that. Also though, tap 7 untapped Merfolk you control to counter target spell, which fits the tapping theme and the countering theme and all that, right? So obviously this is a slam dunk in this deck, and so I decided why not throw my Lull Mage Mentor Intruder Alarm combo in the deck. Of course, Intruder Alarm, pretty infamous card for comboing, and it's a pretty great combo here. 2 and a blue enchantment, creatures don't untap during controller's untap step, which of course is already not much of a downside for us because we have those Seedborn Muse effects. But whenever a creature enters the battlefield, untap all creatures. So of course, if you're in a deck where you want to be tapping down your creatures all the time, this is fantastic because all I have to do is have a creature enter the battlefield, and now my creatures all untap, so I can tap them down to my Azami and draw a bunch of cards. If one of my opponents has a creature enter the battlefield, same thing, right? In response to my opponent casting a creature, I'll just tap down all my creatures to draw a ton of cards, and then they'll all untap when that creature enters the battlefield, right? So just fantastic value. But of course, with the Lull Mage Mentor, we get into more of an obnoxious scenario here, where when my opponent casts a creature spell, I'll just tap down 7 Merfolk and counter it, and then when I counter it, that first ability will trigger, having a 1/1 Merfolk enter the battlefield, which then triggers my Intruder Alarm and untaps all my creatures. So essentially this becomes not quite a hard lock, but pretty darn close, where everything my opponents do, I'll tap down 7 Merfolk in response, counter whatever they're doing, trigger my Lull Mage Mentor's first ability, creating a token which untaps everything and repeats the process. Sounds pretty obnoxious, am I right? Again, as I was going down the Merfolk Wizard tribal theme, I just kept coming across more and more cards that were kind of obnoxious that actually really much fit the theme of what we're doing. Harbinger of the Seas, which just came out in Modern Horizons 3, is a Merfolk Wizard. 1 blue 2/2, non-basic lands or islands. So our opponents are probably not going to love this as well, right? It's going to shut down a lot of decks, obviously. Wander Wine Prophets is a Merfolk Wizard that fits in this deck that is doing something that a lot of Commander players aren't going to love. 4 blue Merfolk Wizard 4/4, champion a Merfolk. Of course, that's super easy to do with all the Merfolk we have in this deck. Whenever Wander Wine Prophets deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a Merfolk. If you do, take an extra turn after this one. So now we can take a whole lot of turns, possibly infinite turns, which again is another kind of maybe obnoxious thing that people do in Commander games that your opponents aren't going to love. It fits in the deck, and Thrasios in himself is just an obnoxious card that a lot of people don't love. He's a blue-green Merfolk Wizard. He just very easily fits into this deck, and of course, because we have Seedborn Muse in here already, now we can start doing some really obnoxious stuff where we use that Thrasios ability to scry 1, reveal the top card. If it's a land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, otherwise draw a card on every single opponent's turn. Kind of obnoxious, I guess, but obviously it fits very easily into this deck. I didn't really have to look very hard. All this stuff was just very obvious. Thrasios is a Merfolk Wizard. He's blue-green. He fits in the deck already. He's just a great card, but I also have Seedborn Muse in here, so now we're doing that as well. Let's throw Galecaster Colossus in here. Tap an untapped wizard you control, return target non-land permanent you don't control the owner's hand. So obviously if we get this guy in play, we can just start bouncing all our opponents' permanents, which I'm sure they're going to hate. And again, if we have the Intruder Alarm in play, now in response to our opponents casting any creature, I mean, they essentially won't be able to cast any creature, because if they cast a creature, we'll tap down all our team to bounce all their permanents. Then when the creature resolves and enters the battlefield, we'll untap all our stuff so we can do it again. So this is just going to make our opponents not want to ever cast a creature if Intruder Alarm is in play. How about Supreme Inquisitor? Again, another card that wants to be tapping down wizards. This is the theme I originally went with, was, okay, there's a whole lot of wizards out there that want to be tapping to do stuff, and there's a whole bunch of merfolk that as well. That was the idea I came up with, where, okay, let's make a blue-green deck with a bunch of merfolk and wizard that want to be tapping to do different things, and then we'll untap them with our Seedborn Muse, right? All of that. Supreme Inquisitor is kind of a win con in this deck, another possibly very obnoxious thing that you could be doing that your opponents aren't going to love. Tap 5 untapped wizards you control, search target player's library for up to 5 cards and exile them. Then that player shuffles, so now you can just start searching through your opponent's libraries for cards you don't want them to have and exiling them. And it can be a win con where you can just end up exiling your opponent's entire library. But of course, because you're exiling cards from their library, it will very much help with the other possible win con in this deck, Drowner of Secrets. 2 and a blue, Merfolk Wizard. 1/3, tap and untap Merfolk you control, target player mills a card. So now we can use this as a win con as well, just milling out our opponents. Tapping 1 Merfolk to mill 1 card doesn't seem very good, but remember, we first of all have a ton of Merfolk in place. We can tap 7 Merfolk to mill 7 cards, and then they all untap on the next player's turn, or they all untap with the intruder alarm, so on and so forth, right? So it will speed up the process as well. Or we can use this to mill ourselves. Of course, this is target player mills a card, and the reason why is because Thassa's Oracle is also a Merfolk Wizard. And I will just say, outside of this one card, because I think likely Thassa's Oracle is probably not considered a casual commander card in most people's mind. But outside of this card, every other card in this deck, I would say, is definitely a casual card. And this is a casual deck, even though it is incredibly obnoxious and a lot of people are going to be annoyed by it. Maybe you have a play group that you guys all play annoying like Turgid or something, right? You play those obnoxious commanders that people don't love and you're okay with it. You're fine with it, right? This is very much a casual commander deck. In fact, I don't even think it's an 8. It's probably more like a 7. It's just doing a lot of things that commander players are going to hate outside of Thassa's Oracle, right? That would be the one place where maybe if you actually want to put this deck together, but you don't want it to feel like a competitive deck, you could take Thassa's Oracle out. I just thought, man, isn't it funny? We're already doing all these super obnoxious things in this deck. Thassa's Oracle is indeed a Merfolk Wizard, and we can mill ourselves with Drowner of Secrets if we have our Thassa's Oracle in hand, obviously, and then just play our Thassa's Oracle as a win. Again, you could take this out if you don't want to do that. Everything else in the deck will still work perfectly fine. I just thought it was kind of funny that we're already going down that route of doing things people don't like. And Thassa's Oracle happens to be a Merfolk Wizard. Again, I'm just literally looking through all the Merfolk Wizard to see the ones that fit in this deck, and more I'm coming across things that people aren't going to love. And I thought, you know what? Why don't we just go all in and make a super obnoxious deck that probably a lot of people will hate. But again, maybe you're that guy out there playing in a particular play group where your play group doesn't care if all their stuff gets countered. They just want to see interesting decks doing their thing. I mean, come on, that Lull Mage Mentor Intruder Alarm combo is pretty neat, I think. This certainly can be an obnoxious deck to play against, without a doubt, but it does definitely work well. So if you were at all interested in annoying your play group with this deck, the deck list is in the description below. Feel free to check it out yourself. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.